Hi, my name is Sandy Lieske. I'm a Quiltworx Certified Instructor located here in Boise, Idaho. One of the things that I've had a chance to spend quite a bit of time on over the last several months is working on the Quiltworx designs that make use of the Fabric Confetti Digitized Embroidery designs that allow you to do the applique on your embroidery machine. And I have found this to be really fun to do. The stitch outs in the designs, I've used all of the designs that are available, and the stitch outs are absolutely amazing. I've completed a pepper dish using the digital designs, a rainforest blossoms, Irish thistle. I have OK corral in process, and I also have poinsettia bouquet in process. And I've also used the dinner plate dahlia dots. And in all cases, I have been extremely happy with the way the design stitched out. Also with poinsettia bouquet, Vanessa has added some really interesting stitching on the inside of the circles as well as the leaves. And so it just adds kind of a fun twist to the projects. And for me, what I have found is that the machine applique really adds a nice finishing touch to the beautiful Quiltworx projects that I have made. Through the process of working on these projects, I've been doing a lot of experimenting with how to get the best machine embroidery results. And by that I mean I want to eliminate all puckering in the background fabric, in particular around the stitching. I don't want to see any puckering, and I also want to have my applique pieces placed as precisely as possible. And that's not so difficult when you have a single hooping, but in cases where the designs have multiple hoopings, and many of them, in fact probably most of them do, it's really important that you get your applique pieces placed properly, or when you do the subsequent hoopings, you may have pieces that are just off skew a little bit and it just doesn't look as nice. In this focus for me in trying to figure out how do I get the best quality with my output, I've really focused on three particular things that I feel need to be thought through or examined in this whole process. And those include how to prepare your background fabric, what kind of stabilizer to use in your embroidery hoop, and how to position your background in the hoop once you have the registration stitch out in place. And those three topics are what I want to touch on real quickly and briefly today. First thing, preparing your background fabric. Here's a shape that is going to go into a second rainforest blossoms for me. And in preparing my background fabric, obviously the first thing I'm going to do is press it really well. And many of us use Best Press pretty extensively, as do I. And so I will always give my fabrics a good pressing with Best Press as a way to really eliminate as many wrinkles as possible and to get as nice a finish as possible on the piece. Although Best Press is a very light starch, it really doesn't stiffen up your fabric like you might want to see when you're doing machine embroidery. And one of the tips I in fact got from Vanessa at Fabric Confetti is to try Niagara spray starch. I had never used this before in my quilting projects, but I picked some up at the grocery store and tried it, and it works amazingly well to really stiffen up your background fabric in a way that allows you to improve your results on your embroidery machine. I will do about 2 or 3 spraying with the Niagara spray starch, pressing it dry in between, and that seems to give me a good firm fabric surface to work with. The other thing you can consider is if you want to put some kind of lightweight interfacing on the back of your piece. And you can see I've done that with this piece. What I did here was put a very lightweight interfacing. I typically use Pellin products. There's, you know, even ultra weight interfacings you can use. And I applied that to my entire fabric that was going to be used for this background piece. And then I went ahead and cut out my shapes. And this, using stabilizer in our Quiltworx projects is probably a topic that people will have very strong opinions about. And what I have heard is people don't like using interfacing on the back of a piece that's going to be placed within a Quiltworx project, is it may add a little bit of bulk in the seam and make it more difficult for your project to come together. I have in fact used interfacing on quite a few of my background pieces, in particular when I have a very light background piece. I feel like I need some type of very light stabilizer on the back of that to make sure that I'm getting good results with my machine applique. And I haven't found any issues when I've been assembling my quilts. I also recently finished up a Rainforest Blossoms class, and I had my students considering whether they wanted to apply a light interfacing to their background. All of them did. Even the person, the student who was doing the applique the traditional way that Judy describes in her patterns, and she felt like that really enabled her to get great results. So it's definitely something to consider. And then there's a third alternative, again, which is something that I recently learned about from Vanessa at Fabric Confetti, and that's to use a sticky back stabilizer on the back of the piece that you're embroidering on. So here's an example of a project that I'm working on that'll be a new set of designs for the chevron table runner. And I've been working with Vanessa on those designs. It's a very dense pattern. There are 5 hoopings at each end of the table runner. And as she was working through these, she did not want to apply a stabilizer, you know, some kind of Pellin interfacing on the back of the table runner. But she was concerned about the amount of dense stitching and how was she going to stabilize this runner. And she tried applying this sticky back stabilizer, and so I consequently tried that, and it works fantastically. Basically, so the product I'm using is an OESD product called Stable Stick, and I will you know, right up front say both the embroidery machines I have are Bernina machines, so the stabilizers that I'm familiar with are the OESD brands. There are certainly comparable brands, other brands that you may be familiar with, but this one's called Stable Stick. And what you essentially do is peel away the back of the stabilizer and then apply it to the back of the area that you're going to be doing your machine applique on. And the thing that's really been interesting about this is even through 5 hoopings where in between I'm tearing off the other stabilizer that was in my hoop, the stable stick remains in place. But then once I'm complete with this half of the table runner, I can remove the stable stick stabilizer and I simply have the back of my fabric. And so this has worked really well, and I think this is going to be something I'm going to continue to use moving forward. The only caveat I would raise is that as you're pulling away the stabilizer when you're complete, if you have a fabric that tends to fray, you need to be a little gentle. You can't just rip it off like you might a Band-Aid, because the fabric may be prone to fraying if your fabric is a real sheer type of fabric. So you have to be a little bit careful, but otherwise it's worked quite well. now we have our fabric prepared. The next thing to consider is what are the types of stabilizer that you want to use in your hoop. All of the machine embroidery projects I do, I use at least 2 layers of stabilizer in my hoop. And again, I use OESD's Ultra Clean and Tear, which is a medium weight tearaway stabilizer. And this is what I have used for years, getting very good results on my embroidery machine. They came out with a product recently, which is Ultra Clean and Tear Fusible. And I tried some of this. I thought, I wonder if I could put a layer of the fusible Ultra Clean and Tear on as my top layer in the hoop, and then use that to my advantage when I am placing my background fabric and lining it up with my registration lines. Could I then press it in place? What I had been doing is getting my fabric backing lined up in my hoop, and then kind of lifting it up, spraying 505 adhesive in there. And you don't really want to spray that too much in your house. And I didn't think I got super great results, and so I thought I was going to try this fusible, and I am sold that putting 2 layers, still 2 layers of Ultra Clean and Tear. The bottom layer is the regular Ultra Clean and Tear or medium weight stabilizer, and the top layer is a fusible. And that has worked incredibly well with regards to getting the fabric background lined up with your registration points, and I'm going to talk about that next. Now that we have our background prepared, and one of the things you'll do as well as a part of that preparation on the background is mark your registration lines if they're needed for that particular project. In this case, Rainforest Blossoms has you mark a simple set of crosshairs on your background piece. You do a vertical line down the center of the piece and a horizontal line up 6 1/4 inches. Because this was a dark background, I used a chalk marker. If I have a light background, I really like the water-soluble pens, and then I go back later and just use a little bit of water to get the markings off. In this case, though, you can't see this, but I have marked my crosshairs, and now I'm ready to position it in my hoop. One of the things you'll find with the Fabric Confetti patterns, there will be a PDF file that is a very detailed set of instructions for the pattern. How to prep your background fabric, how to get your shapes cut if you're using a cutting tool like a Cameo. It'll talk through all the hoopings, what each hooping involves, which pieces are in which hooping. And the first stitch out that will always occur is some kind of a reference point, and I'll bring this up closely here. In this particular case, this is for Rainforest Blossoms, and the first stitch out is a simple crosshair. And what I'm going to do is use this, line up my background piece with that crosshair. So what's the best way to do that? I previously used a light table to line up my pieces. I'd place my hoop with my registration lines on the light table, and then I would work to line up my piece on that light table. But when I started using the fusible, that didn't work as well because I couldn't iron my background in place. And then secondly, when I got to this project where the background was dark, I couldn't see through my marks on the top. So I thought, well, I have to go back to aligning my pieces the old-fashioned way, which is going to be using pins, putting a pin through several points in my registration line, or my crosshair in this case, on the top fabric, and lining those up with the crosshair on my stabilizer that's been stitched out. And I was doing this on my ironing surface, which is a big board and has a wool pad over the whole thing. Although the wool pad on the big board is pretty thin. It's only about a 1/4 inch thin, and the pins weren't really sticking that well and staying in place. Well, what I did then was started using I have a standalone wool mat. You can't see it too well here, but it's about a 1/2 inch thick. I put this on my ironing board, and then when I go ahead and line up my cross hairs in this particular case, put in, you know, maybe 4 pins, whatever I'm comfortable with, making sure I have everything in position. The pins stick into that wool mat, and you are really assured that when you have your background piece lined up, it is exactly in the position you need. And at that point, if I'm at my ironing board, I can simply take my iron and press my background piece in place on that fusible. And it holds that background piece exactly in position. And for me, using that fusible has been a game changer in terms of being able to have successful placement of my applique shapes as I move through multiple hoopings. As I said, this project that has 5 hoopings on each end of the table runner, I've been using this approach, and it has worked like a charm in terms of being able to get all of my pieces placed appropriately. So that is a really quick summary of 3 areas: preparing your background fabric, stabilizers for your hoop, and how to position your background fabrics to get really outstanding results using the Fabric Confetti digitized designs with your Quiltworx projects. And here's an example of one of the stitch outs for the next Rainforest Blossoms I'm doing, and they really do look gorgeous. I can post some pictures of the various designs I've done so you can get an idea how they look, but I really hope that you might try some of the things that I've learned and shared in this video, and perhaps you have some ideas that you can share as well. And I look forward to seeing your projects out on the Quiltworx Support Network webpage. Thank you.